The Galaxy S10 was released in 2019 and brought with it a new punch hole display, an in-screen fingerprint reader, and a brand new processor. At release, this phone was crowned as one of the best smartphones of 2019, but 2 years later, with the release of two new Galaxy flagships, how does the Galaxy S10 hold up in 2021? I'm Michael Buncher, and this is the Galaxy S10, 2 years later. The first thing you notice about this device really is the design and in-hand feel. It's gorgeous. I absolutely love the in-hand feel of this device. My model is a gorgeous, shimmery blue color that changes from a really dark blue to a really light blue depending on the color and the light. However, unlike normal glass, this doesn't feel quite as slick. It feels kind of tackier and it rejects fingerprints a little better than I've seen normally. As always though, glass is glass and it will smudge and it will crack if you drop it. So I highly advise using a case. I would be so scared about breaking the back or the front of this device. Also, around the sides, it's made out of aluminum, but Samsung polished this aluminum, and to me, honestly, it looks kind of cheap and it feels kind of slippery, and I wish that Samsung had just gone with maybe a matte textured aluminum to help with grip. Around back, there is a pretty wide camera bump. It does help with camera wobble. There isn't really a whole lot of that when you press the phone on a table, but the camera lens is very wide. It kind of reminds me of the Nexus 6P actually, with that huge glass visor on the back. I also smudged the camera lens a lot because the lenses sit where my fingers would naturally go, so I ended up getting a lot of smudges on the camera lens. Moving on from design, the next major thing you'll notice about the Galaxy S10 is the screen, and this is truly a sight to behold. Everyone knows Samsung makes the best screens for mobile devices. That's why Apple, Google, they all use Samsung displays, and even on a 2-year-old phone, the S10 is no exception. The screen just has all of the good words associated with it. It's pretty, it's gorgeous, it's amazing, it's spectacular, all of those. It gets very bright, so there's no trouble viewing it in outdoor areas, as well as pretty dim. I didn't really have to strain my eyes to see it at night. It's also very contrasty, with really good detail in shadows, as well as very well able to differentiate between light and dark scenes. It's also incredibly sharp, even at the Full HD Plus resolution that it comes out of the box with. And I had no problem getting even very close to the screen, and I still couldn't discern pixels. This is a gorgeous display. Everything that it's supposed to just pops. There's incredible detail in dark scenes. It's not too warm or cold, but you can adjust the color temperatures if you really want to. Somehow, this display feels closer to the glass than any display I've ever used. I thought that Apple did the best job laminating their displays together, but Samsung beats them in this area. It feels exactly like you are just touching pictures. Hell, the very thin bezels make everything look more immersive. I didn't mind the unevenness of those bezels as it all just blended away into gorgeous, expansive display. Everything looks better on this screen. From pictures you take, to videos you watch, to even your wallpapers. Everything just looks amazing. I also didn't have any issues with pulse width modulation, which is the method that OLED displays use to modulate their brightness. I was kind of worried because I do suffer from migraines, but the PWM gave me no issues, which I was very pleased about. The curved screen is beautiful, but sometimes unintended touches really do crop up, especially when using gesture navigation. There were times when I found that I would trigger the swipe to go back gesture trying to navigate through multitasking, and other times it wouldn't trigger at all. There is a mode you can use to turn off the edges, but I found that it decreased sensitivity, so I preferred to just keep them on. Really, I love using this screen. It is so colorful, it makes everything look better, just larger than life. This was actually my first time using an OLED display for more than 2 seconds, and I loved how pin sharp everything looked. As I noted before, I didn't really have any issues with it coming by default on Full HD Plus resolution. I tried the Quad HD Plus resolution, and I didn't notice a difference in terms of sharpness, so I went back to Full HD Plus for the battery life savings. I do wish that it was a 90 or even a 120Hz refresh rate, but it wasn't that big of a deal to me. I also didn't find the hole punch being a problem. Sorry, Linus. I really found that it blended in well, and there are no interface elements right up near it for it to obscure. It also didn't make the status bar noticeably bigger, so I didn't find it to be that huge of a deal. I did find that it would scrunch up the notification and system area, kind of like Drew said from Talos of Tech in some of his discussions on notches versus hole punches versus uninterrupted screens. However, even with it taking up some space in the system area, I think that it is a better and less obtrusive way of getting a nearly bezel-less screen without using a notch. When you're using that screen, you're looking at something, mainly the software. And honestly, my first impression of the S10, it didn't start well. It reminded me why I never wanted to get and use a Galaxy phone before: the software. Setting up the device, there were so many menus to jump through, alternate accounts to make and sign into, and honestly, it was just a confusing experience. I mean, initially, why do I need to make a Samsung account just to start up my device? Ultimately, I was able to back out of making a Samsung account because I don't want a Samsung account, but it was still annoying. After I did the initial setup, I was dumped to the Samsung launcher, which quite frankly, I find ugly, and I counted 46 pre-installed Verizon and Samsung apps, which is too many. Stop trying to get me to use Verizon and Samsung services. I don't want them. If I did, I would download them myself. I switched to things like Android Messages for the easier reply from notifications area, and I use Google Photos instead of the default Samsung Photos app. Yes, there are some default Samsung apps that have very nice utility, like the calculator, which does unit conversions. That's not something that I've seen baked into a lot of default calculators. But overall, it just feels like there's too much cruft and extra stuff being thrown at me for Samsung or Verizon to give me more adware. I use the Samsung launcher just long enough to install Nova Launcher, which is better with smoother animations and has more freedom and customizability. Overall, Samsung UI just isn't my favorite. While One UI does give you a lot of customization abilities, as well as moving things down to make them easier, and it feels like a more cohesive experience, I don't think that it looks as clean as default Pixel Android. Like, I'm not a fan of the blurred areas, sometimes UI corners don't match the curve of the screen, and it all just feels a little confusing. I like the customizability, but going into settings kind of hit me in the face with all the different options, and some stuff didn't seem to be in the right place. There's so many features to use that I didn't even get to see all of them, much less have time to test every little feature that Samsung throws into their phones. For example, I swapped out the default Samsung keyboard for Gboard because I prefer the design and functionality of Gboard. Samsung software has some oddities. I don't know if it's an Android 11 thing or just a One UI thing, but notifications on the lock screen are really hard to access. You either have to tap on the very small target of the icons or swipe down the really small touch target to get to them. If you swipe down or up anywhere else on the screen, you go to the passcode enter screen. I do like that on the lock screen, if you click the clock, you can get a widget view with things like your time, upcoming calendar appointments, weather, things like that. This is just one example of where I think Samsung is trying too hard to differentiate themselves and introduces some complexities and oddities that's not necessary. Google has figured out how to do notifications on the lock screen. They figured out how to do notifications in general. It looks cleaner and less overwhelming. So just let Google do it. You don't need to introduce your own thing that's honestly worse. Back to the software experience. I used Nova Launcher rather than the stock launcher, and and I really wish Google would fix the gesture integrations with launchers. Sometimes swipes don't work as well, animations look janky, and it isn't quite as smooth of an experience. That's not a Samsung thing, that's a Google critique. I did though notice a glitch sometimes in the multitasking tray where trying to swipe between open apps would go back, and this is because of the curved screen and the gesture navigation. I'm glad that Samsung fixed this problem on later devices with flat screens, but it was still an annoyance to me. Also, the volume UI is terrible. It is up too high, it is not changeable, and it is incredibly ugly. Samsung, stop aping iOS. There is no reason to do that. On a good note though for Samsung, performance on this S10 was great. I rarely saw any sort of stutters, apps loaded very quickly, and the UI remained smooth 99% of the time. This is honestly one of the biggest compliments I can give Samsung, as performance has been a huge reason I haven't wanted to go to a Samsung device in the past. Their UI was always known to be stuttery and laggy, and just slowed down a few months after purchasing a new device. This device is almost 2 years old. The person that I got it from bought it right when it came out, and I have no problems using it as a main device. At times it even feels faster than my iPhone XR. On a side note, I do think animation speed control is great, and RAM management felt much better than my iPhone. Multiple apps stayed open, which is a huge blessing, and something that I'm not used to because of my iPhone. I also found that thermals were pretty decent. The only time that I felt this device getting warm was blasting it at full display brightness outside while filming this review. Samsung, great job. So, we've covered the design, display, software, and performance. That kind of leads us to everything else. Some of the more minutiae stuff. I didn't really get a chance to test the camera, sadly, but from the few shots I did get, they looked really good. They were plenty colorful, very sharp, they had good detail and contrast, and the camera had many different options to choose from. On the subject of battery life, it was decent, nothing groundbreaking. I could get numerous hours of social media scrolling, watching YouTube, surfing the web, doing research, as well as many hours of standby, and I generally hit about 4 to 5 hours of screen on time. That's pretty good, especially considering this is a used device with an older battery. There was one day where I got intense drain, even when my device was sitting in standby, but I found that low power mode is incredibly useful. It didn't seem to impact performance much, and notifications were still delivered promptly. Speaking of notifications, I think that it looks a little cluttered sometimes, especially with things like NFC toggles, when I don't even have NFC up there. Why do I need that little symbol showing all of the time? Moving on to the Fingerprint Reader, it works very well. I like having it always on, but I think that if a Fingerprint Reader isn't a physical button you can click, the area under the display needs to be wider, or it should be relocated to the power button or the backside for easy locatability. Maybe just move the camera up a little bit and then put the Fingerprint Reader right there. Every now and then I found the Fingerprint Reader could be kind of finicky. There are a few different methods of using it, such as a short hard press or a longer lighter press. I found personally the harder press worked better, as it seemed better able to get a scan of my fingerprint. All in all, it is useful, and I like having a more secure method of biometrics compared to the less secure but more convenient facial unlock. I have found that apps seem to be better designed for iOS compared to Android, with more fluid animations, as well as just better design, better layouts, and more features. Automatically moving to the next app in the multitasking tray I think is a brilliant move. It makes it so much more convenient to get to my recent apps. I also love that I can easily swipe away notifications, although not all notifications can be dismissed. Some just move to silent notifications for annoying things like telling me I have a system update. I know there's an update. I want to get rid of this notification. I'll update when I feel like it. In the quick settings area, toggles turn things on or off, but if you long press on the toggle, you jump to that associated settings area, and pressing on the text opens a menu to your Bluetooth or Wi-Fi connections. This is useful, as it's much more useful than iOS, where turning Bluetooth or Wi-Fi on or off with the toggles just disconnects you for a little bit. But I would still prefer a long press to actually give me the menu right there in the notification, so I don't need to leave what I'm doing at that moment. I also had no problems connecting to AirPods, and they even connected right when I put them in my ear without having to search for them, which other devices I've used don't do. Lastly, sometimes it seemed like the screen needed a little more pressure to activate than I was used to. It felt like it needed kind of a deeper press for it to do anything. So, to wrap this up, the Galaxy S10 is a great device. Even 2 years later, it is a well-built, fast, and long-lasting device. If you can tolerate some of Samsung's software oddities, some of their design decisions, and added complexity, there really wasn't much that I found to complain about the S10. It may not receive that many more software updates, which is annoying, especially considering security is such an important feature nowadays, and the S10 is about out of software updates. But if all you need is a phone to send some text messages, browse social media, run a few apps, the Galaxy S10 provides a wonderful experience with a great screen and an awesome user experience. You can find these for some really good deals on sites like Amazon Renewed. And if you find a good deal on one of these, I highly recommend you pick it up. So that's the Galaxy S10 in 2021. It's not the best, but frankly, recent Samsung flagships are just an iteration of this. There really isn't that many new features you're going to get on a more recent Galaxy S21 or whatnot. If you liked this video, feel free to leave me a like, a comment, and I'd be really appreciated if you'd subscribe. For now, I'm Michael Bunger, and I'll see you later.